Welcome back. We're here at AMAC's Bootcamp for Boomers in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. Thrilled to be joined by three incredible people. We're going to be talking about election integrity. Joining me is Hogan Gidley. We've heard from him earlier, a political communications consultant, more than 20 years experience, and you're currently serving as AFPI's Vice Chair of the Center of Election Integrity and Senior Advisor. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much.
We also have with us Heather Honey. She is a leading expert on election integrity and the founder of Haystack Investigations with over 30 years of experience and recently becoming a leading expert on election integrity here in Pennsylvania. Great to have you with us, Heather. And of course, joining us also, Andy Mangione, the Senior Vice President at AMAC Action, and Andy runs all of AMAC's calls to action. He was integral at helping us form the AMAC Delegate Program. Andy Mangione, great to be with you as well. So folks, we'll go bounce around a little bit, and then we'll have some round-robin questions at the end. So we'll start with you, Andy. Andy, we over here at AMAC have been facing a lot of election integrity battles state by state. Tell us a little bit about some of the recent wins, particularly this big win in Missouri.
I'm happy to do that.
You have a switch.
Right here. Push it up. There you go. Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. I'm not a guy that... Yeah, okay.
Certainly.
Don't give me a prop. Okay.
Andy, AMAC Action has been very much involved in a lot of election integrity efforts across multiple states. Recently, you had a win in Missouri. Can you share with listeners exactly what happened and how this all came about? Good news here.
Rebecca. Yeah. The thing is, you know, our members do all the heavy lifting, and at AMAC Action, we coordinate a lot of activity. Our members are the ones who put election integrity into our issues portfolio after the 2020 election. We support what our members want. So in Missouri, there was a resolution that we were told, with feet on the ground there, that it might have been tricky getting it through the state Senate. This resolution would ban ranked choice voting and only allow for U.S. citizens to vote in Missouri's elections. And it would put a referendum on the ballot and let Missouri's voters decide this. So we activated our membership in the state of Missouri. 460-something messages were sent to the state Senate. The resolution passed, and it slid through the House pretty quickly. So the problem chamber was the Senate, but we got it through. We helped to get it through there. We asked our members to respond, and they did. Now, 400 messages may not sound like a lot, but it's actually 460 messages. But if you're a state senator, you know, people in Congress are used to receiving this kind of activity. You get 10, 12 messages as a state senator, that's a lot. So our members played an integral role in getting the ball rolling and getting it through that important first chamber.
And Andy, real quick, if you could explain ranked choice voting and why it's so bad.
I knew you were going to say that. Okay, I'm glad. So ranked choice voting stinks. Let me just tell you why. It does. It's horrible. And I've said this on Rav's air before. It forces you to, you get a ballot and you rank your candidates. It forces you to vote for people that you may never have even considered or know nothing about. So if your first place person doesn't get a 50% majority, whoever doesn't get a 50% majority is thrown out. Okay, then your second place votes go to that second place candidate. If that person doesn't get 50% plus one majority, they're eliminated. The process continues until somebody receives a 50% plus one majority. Here's why this stinks. Number one, vote tabulation is a nightmare. Just ask the people in New York City. It's horrible, it's complicated, it's complex. Say you've got a loved one in a nursing home or assisted living facility. Here's your ballot. They're looking at this thing, and they have to rank choice an entire general election ballot. It's confusing. But here's the real stickler. Ranked choice voting manufactures a majority. It puts candidates in a position where all they have to do is win the majority of the remaining votes, not the majority of all votes. It's horrible. We're against it, and we're fighting to eliminate it.
Thank you, Andy. So Hogan, tell us a little bit about what you're doing over at AFPI, specifically with the Center for Election Integrity and the great work that you've been involved in.
Thank you very much. We actually, too, have been focused on this ranked choice voting issue, just having a kind of a symposium in Georgia, trying to explain to people that it's a system in which the person who receives the most votes may not even be declared the winner. I mean, it's just completely evil. It may work at the local Moose Club chapter, but it's not going to work for a statewide election. In fact, the two states that did it, Maine and Alaska, are both trying to overturn it now because they realize how clunky and cumbersome it is. But one of the things we wanted to focus on at AFPI was understanding what I think a lot of people on the left don't understand. And we learned this after 2020, which is the Constitution's pretty clear. They don't like that document, as we well know, but the right and responsibility to decide the time, manner, and place of our elections, of course, is given to the state legislatures. And what we saw after 2020 were a lot of rogue governors and secretaries of state and attorneys general and crazy election boards just decide to do things unilaterally without going through the proper channels. And so we built out a system where we have people all over the state in various regions here in Pennsylvania, but also in kind of the big swing states that you would imagine: Arizona, Nevada, Wisconsin, Georgia, North Carolina, et cetera, Michigan. And working with those legislators to educate them on the importance of having good election laws on the books that protect legal votes and legal voters. And I'm here to tell you, we've passed laws in something like 32 states at this point. And if we have a state where a legislature will pass something but the governor just vetoes it, like in Wisconsin, what we did was we just said, fine, we'll take it right to the people. And we put ballot referendums out there, helped write a lot of that language in Wisconsin, and we just had a ballot referendum that passed that banned Zuckerbucks and that also made sure that only election officials could administer elections. Who knew? But we're a whole lot better off now than we were in 2020, but we have a whole lot more work to do in large measure because the left, as you know, you know it too, why do they not want transparency? Why do they not want safeguards out there that make you prove you are who you say you are when you cast a ballot? I wonder. It's very interesting, very fascinating. But just take heart in this. The top 3, 4, 5 issues on election integrity are wildly popular. 85% of the people in this country believe you should have a photo identification to vote in an election. Now, listen, I didn't say voter ID. You can't get on a plane with an electric bill. They want photo identification. 84% want ballots returned to election officials by election day. It's not election week. It's not election month. It's not election year. And so as we took a look at all of those things, we really did talk to legislators on the ground because they were getting a lot of pushback saying, you can't implement these things because it's voter suppression. Well, we did a big bill, obviously, in Georgia, and what happened? Skyrocketed, like 200% increase in participation in the black community. Over 150% increase in the white community as well, because it turns out when people actually believe and have trust and faith and confidence that the outcome is going to be right, they'll show up to vote. So that's what we're doing all over the country right now.
Excellent. Great to hear that. So Heather, there has been a lot of information floating out there, I think over the last 4 years, really what went wrong in 2020. But perhaps you can tell us what went wrong in your view in Pennsylvania, and where do we stand today?
Well, how much time do you have? So, there were a lot of things that went wrong. Hogan referred to several of those things. First of all, executive overreach, right? I mean, the legislature lays out the laws, and we don't have great laws here in Pennsylvania. I mean, we don't have a lot of guardrails on our elections, but we do have some. So when the executive branch that has no authority to change the law issues directives and guidance and opinions that contradict the law, it disrupts even those, the sort of guidelines that we do have. So for starters, for sure, executive overreach was a big impact in 2020. In addition to that, the third-party funding, right? That was a huge impact, and you can look at the statistics. It's been well reported that having the influence of Zuckerbucks, right, in particular places to drive the turnout, it was incredibly impactful. And what we have now, so thankfully our legislature did pass a ban on Zuckerbucks, on third parties, but the Biden administration has issued an executive order, 14019, which is like Zuckerbucks on steroids. And what they are doing is they are weaponizing the federal agencies. Every one of them has been directed to partner with third parties of the Biden administration's choosing to literally use the federal government to do get out the vote, voter registration drives, and partner with these third parties, which, of course, is a violation of Pennsylvania law. Our legislators made that happen here, and so when we see that the Biden administration is doing that, I'm happy to tell you that there are 27 members of the Pennsylvania legislature who are suing to take back control of our elections. So there's a case out there, it's Kiefer v. Biden, and we just appealed yesterday to the Supreme Court, asking the Supreme Court to expedite and look at this case and grant them standing. So of course we were thrown out, as usual, for standing, but we need to restore the balance of power. We have to put the law, making the law regarding the time, place, and manner of elections back in the hands of the legislature, even if it's a legislature that we don't love right now in Pennsylvania. We need to restore the balance of power.
Thank you, Heather. So Andy, you hear much from AMAC's membership, over 2 million strong. Tell us, what are some of the major concerns that AMAC members have regarding election integrity and their vote in 2024?
I'll be glad to, Rebecca. Now, I mentioned before that we're a member-driven organization, and we listen to our members. We poll them on a weekly basis. We engage them with our call to action campaigns. We read the comments they leave on the polls. And they're very concerned that the Democrats are going to pull the same shenanigans they did in 2020. They're very concerned about vulnerable voters, those people in nursing homes, their loved ones in assisted living facilities, ballot harvesting, illegal ballot harvesting, helpers coming into a nursing home saying, let me help you fill out your ballot. Oh, by the way, I'll take it. And of course, they're very concerned about the influx of the illegals that are in this country that are given a pathway to vote.
Excellent, yes, and also the illegals voting in our elections. I know that more and more people are concerned that if there is no voter ID requirement, what that could, what might happen as a result. Thank you, Andy. I want to talk a little bit more about Zuckerbucks. We've been hearing that word, Zuckerbucks. Can you tell our audience a little bit, what is Zuckerbucks, and why is this private funding of our elections so dangerous?
Oh, sure, yeah. So when we refer to Zuckerbucks, obviously in 2020, Mark Zuckerberg and his wife donated over $400 million to election offices. Generally speaking, it was county election offices. However, and you've probably heard of the organization CTCL, the Center for Tech and Civic Life. They distributed the vast majority of the funding. However, about $70 million of the Zuckerbucks went to an organization called CEIR. And CEIR distributed millions to Secretary of State's offices across the country, including in Pennsylvania, where I believe Pennsylvania's Secretary of State's office received about $13 million for COVID relief. And so that funding was used. So for example, we did a right to know request. That's like our Pennsylvania, Freedom of Information Act law. We did a right to know request for the spending. How did the Department of State spend their Zuckerbucks that they got, the $13 million? Well, you probably wouldn't be surprised to learn that they did things like doing public transportation in the big cities, right? They did like bus wraps, to get out the vote in the big cities, heavily Democrat areas. There have been analyses out there showing that the amount of money that was donated from Zuckerbucks went to primarily Democrat areas, and it certainly had an impact. But the most interesting thing we found in our right to know request is that some of the COVID millions that came into the Department of State, in addition to giving CEIR access to an extraordinary amount of data on all of us here in Pennsylvania, but they also used it to do things like fly aerial banners around big cities to get out the vote and, again, encourage mail voting. And so that's kind of the influence of Zuckerbucks. So when I say that the Biden executive order 14019 is like Zuckerbucks on steroids, $400 million is nothing when you look at what the budgets are for the federal agencies. So we must push back on that. And like I said, 27 brave members of the Pennsylvania legislature are doing everything we can. So, and if you want to read about that lawsuit, by the way, if you don't mind, yes. The Election Research Institute is sponsoring that case. So you can go to the electionresearchinstitute.org, and there's a cases tab. So go check out the cases. You can download our Supreme Court filing from there as well.
Thank you, Heather. Back to you, Hogan. You recently praised the House for passing something called the American Confidence in Elections, or ACE Act. Can you share with us a little bit what it is exactly?
Yeah. First, if I may, I think everyone in this room understands the importance of election integrity, but I just want to take a little sample, a survey. So this is going to be some crowd participation, okay? Who wants closed southern borders? Raise your hand. Okay. Who wants lower crime in our communities? All right. Good so far. Who wants peace around the world? All right. I'm here to tell you all of these things are important, and you have heard people up on stage talking about these things. Who wants to restore parental rights? Yeah, okay, that's a big one. I'm here to tell you those things can't happen. They will never happen unless you elect people who can implement the policies you want to see implemented. At the same time, it's very difficult to get those people elected when we have problems with our election process, as you well know. And so the documented cases of irregularities, illegalities, anomalies, and fraud are clear to most of the people in this room. In fact, I want to take a quick stroll down memory lane. Anyone remember 2016 after the election? It was your patriotic duty to question the outcome of that election. In fact, if you didn't, you all work for Vladimir Putin. Now, you simply ask the question, how is it possible that I went to vote and someone voted in my name before I got here? I have a question. How come Pennsylvania state law is pretty clear? You have to signature match ballots, but yet we counted 3 million mail-in ballots without signature matching a single one of them. How is that possible? Well, you're a denier, of course. Remember, Democrats in every election since Reagan have refused to seat electors. In fact, it was the head of the January 6th committee, Jamie Raskin and Benny Thompson, who refused to seat electors in the Trump election. So the idea that somehow what we're doing is out of step with history is ridiculous, because people on the right and the left have complained about this now for decades in this country. And while we've replaced the dimpled ballots, the hanging chads from the 2000 election way back in Florida with mass mail-in and drop boxes, there's still serious issues out there, and it is our patriotic duty to question what our government is doing and not doing. And you raised an interesting word earlier, which is the word accountability. We know our elected officials aren't following the laws on the books, so even when we pass them a lot of times, they just ignore them because of COVID or because of money they get from the government or whatever else. It's our job to hold them accountable for that. And so it encourages me when I come to things like this, because I see the engagement and the involvement. And one more thing I'll say, because I know you did ask me a question. I'm not even getting close to that question. But someone brought up the churches earlier. I think this is a secret weapon for us. Every single election, 30 to 40 million evangelicals don't vote in our elections. If a sliver of a percentage of those people actually engaged and voted, we'd never lose. So we have a lot of pastors we're engaging with at the local level that are important, because God ordained the family, no question. God ordained the church, no question. But God also ordained the state. And a lot of these pastors are becoming convicted because they feel like they're just 2/3 pastors. They're only focused on the church and the family because they never thought the government would come into the church or the family, and now they realized their silence was complicit with the moves that people were making to try and take over this country in so many ways. So that's a long way to talk about the fact that your engagement matters. Get involved with those churches. Have the voter registration drives. Have the get out the vote efforts at the local level. And I'm telling you, we're going to take back the country. No question about it. And you did ask a question. I'm so sorry. Maybe go on to something else because I took a lot of time there. It just was so infuriating.
Absolutely. We'll come back to you. So, Andy, how serious of a threat is it that non-citizens, illegals, could be voting in our future elections, and what can be done about it between now and November?
Well, it is a serious threat, and I know that Hogan's got some opinions on this as well, and Heather. But you're seeing Biden mandate that the U.S. Marshal Service, when they take somebody who's in this country illegally into custody, that they're given voter registration materials. Okay? They are co-opting what the state is supposed to be doing, what a particular state is supposed to be doing. This is a pathway to voting. And a lot of states will accept a photo ID or a social security number, of which these illegals are given both, without asking for proof of citizenship. I know it doesn't happen here. Okay? I live in Kentucky. We have a voter ID. Great people show their ID, but we don't ask for proof of citizenship. So yes, this is a very real problem. This is, and it's not hard for anybody in this room to put together that Joe Biden opened up the borders, bringing millions of people into this country illegally to get them addicted to government and the goodies and to give them a pathway to vote. So as far as what can be done, I take comfort in the knowledge that states like Missouri are some state legislatures are putting out legislation that we're supporting and we're actively engaging our members in to ensure that only U.S. citizens vote. Chip Roy, if it hasn't, I don't think it's been introduced yet, but it's going to be introduced, the SAVE Act that we are going to support. That will, it'll be a federal legislation to stop non-citizens and illegal aliens from voting. So work is being done. Obviously, having a kitchen table discussion about it, this is not a stretch. There's some states that are calling illegals new Americans. They're not new Americans. They're lawbreakers. All right? And they're breaking our laws just by coming into this country illegally, but God knows what else that they're doing. We've read about the violence towards Americans and the tragic loss of life. So there are things that are being done, Rebecca. We need to do more. We need to have a huge narrative about this.
Thank you so much, Andy. So, Heather, I want to talk about the Electronic Registration Information Center, or ERIC. You've done a lot of research around this issue, and you've also helped convince a number of Republican states to pull out of it. Explain to our viewers exactly what it is.
Yeah, so the ERIC, as it's known, is allegedly, it was, when people talk about it, when you read about it in the mainstream media, they tell you it's a voter fraud detector or voter list maintenance. But to understand why ERIC is so bad, you have to understand the origins. And so when you look at the origins of ERIC and what they started out to do, it was to, they wanted to have a nationwide voter registration database. They also want to do universal voter registration. So again, we trace the origins back and we've simply shared the history, the real history, not made up stuff, the real history of how they came to be with, some open-minded secretaries of state who made the decision for their state that this was not right. And here's why. So, when you look at voter data, right, elections are won by the campaign that has the best data. That's not my opinion. Karl Rove says that. David Plouffe says that. The campaign with the best data wins. So what is ERIC? So ERIC requires the states, including Pennsylvania, to disclose not just the voter registration database, which you and I can all get. It requires the state to turn over every single person who is in the motor vehicle database. So whether you have a driver's license, a non-driver photo ID, that data is transferred to this third party who is, very opaque. We can't see what's going on at the organization. And so that data is incredibly valuable. Those are the people who are unregistered, right? But they are also the people who were offered the opportunity to register and declined to do so. So what does ERIC do? It requires the states to contact each and every single one of those people and encourage them to vote. Now, what happens across the country is sometimes when they make that list, people who are non-citizens have driver's licenses in many states, right? So now they're sending out these cards saying, hey, it looks like you're not registered. You should register to vote. In Colorado, it was like 30,000 non-citizens got an invitation from the Department of State in Colorado to register. So it's very dangerous for those reasons. But here's I think, what the key issue was. That list is so valuable because it's not publicly available. Federal data privacy laws prevent campaigns and political parties from getting access to the state motor vehicle agency data, right? So this was a workaround. It was a way to get access to data that money cannot buy, right? So again, the most accurate data, your driver's license, you update that. So to put that in the hands of, political folks. And here's what happened in Pennsylvania. In 2020, when the Department of State received the grant for the aerial banners from CEIR Zuckerberg, they signed an agreement to allow CEIR to have that list of EBUs, the eligible but unregistered, which were those people, the whole list of everybody who was in the state motor vehicle database, turned it over to a Zuckerberg-funded organization to do who knows what with it. And so that's just not acceptable, right? We can't use data. We can't give one side a non-competitive advantage. And that's exactly what Eric does. So, contact your legislators. Yeah, we need to get Pennsylvania out of Eric.
How many states, we've banned that though in several states already, right?
Yeah. So that's a great point. A lot of states have exited ERIC, right? It's a membership organization. So in Pennsylvania, we don't even have a law that says that we can be members. The secretary just said, oh, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to sign up for this membership. It was very cleverly designed. If you look at the history of it, it's really quite clever, diabolical, really. So a lot of states have exited. And other states have passed laws. Like, for example, there was just a bill that went through Virginia because the Virginia legislature flipped from Republican to Democrat. They tried to pass a law to rejoin ERIC because they were one of the states that had exited ERIC. Thankfully, the governor vetoed it, and they will not be joining. North Carolina banned it, but Florida's out. There are only a handful of Republican states, so we're making progress, but we have a long way to go. So,
thank you so much, Heather. So Hogan, you served as National Press Secretary during Donald Trump's re-election campaign. Back in 2020, how concerned were you then with election integrity measures, and how does that compare to where we are today?
Very back then. In fact, I don't think I've ever told this story publicly, but I was the First Lady had asked me to go along with her and go to some of the swing states like Wisconsin and Michigan and give speeches, North Carolina, et cetera. And, she called and said, Hogan, I can't do it, but you know how she talks. She's wonderful. And she asked me, she said, are we going to win? And I said, ma'am, I think so, and here's why. And I kind of outlined some of the data and the things we were seeing on the campaign side. But I did tell her, I'm not sure they're going to let us. And she looked at me and she was like, what? And I said, it just feels like with COVID and other things, they're going to try and rig it so that it's a virtual impossibility. And we talked further, but understand, we had a massive get out the vote effort. Folks, Donald Trump got 10 million more votes in a re-elect. It always goes down. He got 10 million more and still lost. Okay? So that's a serious problem and concern. And I'll tell you, one of the reasons I even started the Center for Election Integrity at AFPI, I didn't actually start it, but I got a call after the election. My mama called me up and she said, you got to fix this. And I said, fix what? She goes, these elections, it's all a joke, it's all bad. And I was like, now how am I going to fix? And she goes, you just do it. I'll talk to you later. And hung up, and I thought, all right, well, mama said, I got to do it. And I started looking around, and I'd gone to the family, and the Trump family. I talked to the president. I talked to everyone to try and figure out. I didn't want to duplicate efforts. I was going to be a small little thing by myself to try and figure out what was going on in the states. And then when I went to AFPI, they said, I was in a meeting with people because that was my last stop to say, okay, this is a serious issue. We got to focus on this. I'm telling you, it's going to be one of the top 3 issues coming up in the next several campaigns. And yes, it has been. And the person I was talking to stood up and said, don't be mad, and ran out of the room. And I thought, what are they doing? And they came back and they had a picture. And the picture was a graph of the Center for Election Integrity, and it had my name and my face on it, and Kim Blackwell, who was a former Secretary of State of Ohio. And I thought, all right, I think God put me here for a reason, so I think I'm just going to take this and go on with AFPI, and it's been wonderful ever since. But the concern was there because we saw what they're willing to do. Listen, the government elections, this is the left's religion, okay? And so when we get done with an election, we all disengage, we take a breath, and we go, all right, next summer, we're all going to get involved, and we're going to make a push. And the left goes, no. As soon as the polls close, they start up again. They never ever stop. Thankfully, what I've seen nationally in groups like this one and others, people are more willing to be engaged now than they ever have been before, being poll watchers, poll workers, going out and ballot harvesting where it's legal, registering voters, going to gun shows, going to auto shows, getting people on board to get out there, because it's not just about getting people to vote early, which we're all about, okay? Vote when you have a chance to vote. It's also about increasing the totals. Because if we just get the same numbers to vote early, we still lose. We got to build that coalition better, and that's a responsibility that actually falls upon you guys more than me.
And that's a great segue into my next question, which I'd love for all 3 of you to respond. We'll do a bit of a round robin. There were so many changes, Andy, that we saw happen in 2020, especially coming out of in the middle of the pandemic. Things like mail-in voting became highly popular. Should conservatives embrace mail-in voting, Andy? And should, the broader question really is this year, this election, should some of the old, what was done in the past, what needs to change?
Well, I think conservatives should embrace anything that helps them win that's legal, okay? And mail-in voting was, Heather outlined that, and we all knew what happened in 2020. If it's verifiable and if it's legal, then why not? Okay, the left, we've been involved in election integrity from an AMAC action perspective since 2020. This is our members demanded that we get involved in this. And one thing that I've learned in working with folks like Heather and Hogan is that the left has been running circles around us. We are catching up. We are catching up. I don't want people here to leave discouraged. We are making progress, and we're making good progress, but we do realize there's a lot of more work that has to be done. So if it's verifiable and if it's legal, yes.
Excellent. And follow up, Andy, in 2024, for this presidential election, how are you engaging AMAC members so they can participate?
Well, AMAC members realize that this is an existential election, okay? And we are doing a couple of different things. I saw the hands that were raised, and I want to thank everybody here who's an AMAC member. Thank you so much, because you are the ones that are doing the heavy lifting in these call to action campaigns. If you are not an AMAC Action delegate, if you are not an AMAC Action chapter leader or interested in forming a chapter, I suggest that you talk to that. Jennifer, please stand. I know that you're little, okay? Talk to Jennifer Bengston is our operations vice president who runs the ground game. We get our members involved in advocacy and turn them into citizen advocates through our delegate program, through our chapter program. We form statewide chapters. Heather's been very gracious with her time talking to folks on the statewide level here in Pennsylvania. We're also, if you're an AMAC member, we just did our first send to recruit poll workers and election observers. 22 people signed up across the state here in Pennsylvania on our first send, and we're very encouraged by that. We want 2,000 people here. So, but we have from now until the end of October, beginning of November to continue to recruit. So we're actively engaged in asking our members to get involved in the process and also to become more politically involved through our outreach platforms like the AMAC Delegate Program and our chapter program.
Thank you so much. Heather.
Yeah, so kind of the elephant in the room here is that a lot of election integrity advocates want to go back to in-person voting, right? I mean, there are a lot of people that feel that way. And I will say, if we want to go back to in-person voting, we have to win elections. And so right now, we have mail voting in Pennsylvania. So kind of, like we talked about, hold your nose and vote, right? Hold your nose and vote by mail until we can actually get back the state legislature and make the changes that we want, right? We can do that. But in the meantime, right, we have this now. What are the things that we can do to sort of put some guardrails on these mail ballots? Well, I mean, again, how much time do you have? But one of the things I want to encourage you all to do is to talk to your county board of elections. The people that are on the board of elections in your county, develop relationships with them, talk to them. Because even though the Supreme Court has said, well, I guess you don't have to verify signatures of mail ballots, very carefully, what we need to understand is that what it says is that the county board of elections may not reject a mail ballot based solely on the signature. So what can they do? If there's a signature that doesn't match, your county board of elections can set those aside to look at the voter record, right? See if there is some other thing in that voter record that makes it unlikely that that is a real person, unlikely that the actual voter signed that. We can do that. Our county boards of elections can do that. And a lot of you probably say, well, my board of elections is, they're not going to do it. Look, this is common sense. This is common sense. This is not a fringe idea. The states that have to verify signatures, okay, so we cannot reject a ballot based solely on that, but you know what? That can be a factor, and then that can cause them to look more closely. So please develop a relationship with your board of elections, talk to your county commissioners, and this is not a fringe issue, and there are some things that we can do to try to shore up the security of the mail ballots, because I know that's a concern for everybody.
Hogan.
Yeah. Another audience participation. How many of you are Eagles fans? How many of you are Steeler fans? Okay, one guy. Good for you. All right, I like them both, so that's fine. I went to Ole Miss. I'm an A.J. Brown fan. Long story. Here's the point. The laws on the books exist where you can ballot harvest, you can ballot chase, you can mail vote. We may not like that, and I understand. But it'd be like if the Eagles said, all right, Sunday we're going to play this game, and I know you score points by running, passing, and kicking. It's like our side says, but what we're going to do is we don't like throwing and running, so we're just going to kick to win. You ain't going to win. You have to utilize the laws in the books to beat them at their own game, and I'll give you a great example. Once you beat them at it, they will want to change it. We may be back to same-day voting sooner rather than later, because go back and look at 2012. Obama outdid everybody on Facebook. And all the media said, oh my gosh, isn't that guy brilliant? Look at what they did with Facebook. No one ever thought about that. He utilized it and weaponized it in a way we'd never seen before. Come 2016, Donald Trump does better on Facebook. What do they say? We should probably ban and censor Facebook. If we beat them at their game, they will want to change the law. In fact, one of the ways we got the Zuckerbucks passage, the ending Zuckerbucks in Pennsylvania was, one of the guys on the committee said, I have a question. What if the Koch Foundation came in and gave the same amount of money but only focused on conservative areas? They're like, we should probably ban Zuckerbucks. So we have the opportunity there to do what they do to us. And once we take back the power, we can change the laws, but we have to get there first. And so holding your nose and doing it the way that we may not want to do it, but we know works is good. And I'll give you one last example as I close on this point. If you're not at the table, you're on the menu, okay? You got to be in those rooms seeing what's going on. And a great example was a Youngkin race that I kind of helped with in Virginia. We had a little old lady who would go around to county clerks and ask questions and ask to see voter rolls because she could by law. She was very sweet, didn't have a Republican hat on or a Democrat hat on or a MAGA hat. She just would come in with the law and say, hey, I'm here. I want to pray with you. What can I do? And then want to see the voter rolls. And she went to one place and called us. It said, seasonal guest workers inquire within. And she said, what does that mean? I said, I don't know. Go in there. Not me, but somebody said, go ask. She goes in there. And the person said, oh, yeah, we use seasonal guest workers to count ballots. Well, that's completely illegal. Flagging that would not have occurred had we not had someone going into the rooms to ask the tough questions, not being combative, How can we help? We know you have a tough job. Getting in there and finding out what's going on, because there are things happening. Some of them are malicious. Some of them are just ignorant. Some are just stupid. Some are just lazy. But either way, laws are being violated, and it's going to take each of you to have eyes on that, to flag it so we can prevent it, because those provisional ballots you're talking about, if the signature doesn't match, folks, once it goes through the machine, it's over. If you can flag it on the front end and put them in a big provisional pile, we'll win those cases in court all day because the signatures don't match. There's an X there. The address is wrong. We can win those, but you have to stop it on the front end.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. This has been a wonderful panel. Hogan, Heather, Andy, thank you so much for being here with us, and we'll be back in just a few moments after this quick break. Thank you.